wet and wacky day here in Portland, Oregon. We welcome you to Friends Talking Nerdy. This is Tim the Nerd, and seated next to me we have Professor Aubrey. And this week we're going to talk about something that can be hard for some people to wrap their heads around because healing trauma due to for whatever like emotional trauma I guess you deal with for whatever reasons growing up can seem like, how does it heal and will it ever heal, right?
Sure. Yeah. And not knowing necessarily the steps that you might go through. And so we found this article that deals with how you treat trauma.
And how that could potentially end up healing you after the fact, because I think, and I think we'll even touch upon it in the article here. It's one of those things that if you don't know what therapy can offer, it can be kind of overwhelming, I guess, to think of how could they possibly help me. And also, if you are like, let's just throw a mental health condition out there, depression. As we've talked about it many times, people that are depressed do have the tendency of having the worldview of it's happening to me and only to me. I'm the only person in human history to have dealt with this. Nobody will understand me. When at the end of the day, being able to, discuss it, whether it be with a therapist or in a group therapy type setting, can help to end up healing your trauma. But to your point, yeah, we did find a great article. You found a great article, I should say. Let me correct myself here. Give proper credit where it's due.
I found an article. Woo!
Yeah. So excited, aren't you?
Oh my gosh.
All right. It is from our friends at Psychology Today, written by Jennifer Gerlach. I think we've read some of her articles on the show before.
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, so at this point, we should like reach out to her and be like, "Hey, we like your work." But she is yeah, because I remember this last time, the LCSW, you told me what that acronym means.
All right, licensed clinical social worker.
That's right. But she wrote the article, Is It Possible to Heal Trauma in Therapy? And as we always do here for Psychology Today articles, we're going to go through the bullet points, read them to you, and open up the floor to discussion. Because, again, I think for important topics like this, even though the information as presented in Psychology Today is very basic, very simple, very plain, which there is nothing wrong with that because it's an introductory to the topic, right?
Yeah.
Yep. All right. So, how about? Oh, before I do forget, I should say I do try and bring it up every time we bring up one of these articles. We do encourage you to read the entire article. Go to our show description. You'll be able to tap on the link there that will bring you straight to Psychology Today to be able to read Jennifer Gerlach's article. But how about you dive into point number 1 here?
Okay, so number 1 is facing the experience. Before a traumatic event has been processed, we tend to become ultra sensitive to any reminders of the occurrence. Just like how when you've broken your arm, any amount of pressure can cause immense pain, post-traumatic stress can cause even indirect encounters with the memory to feel unbearable. It's natural to avoid these things, for example, by not talking about what happened or altering one's life to avoid reminders. Sometimes blocking out the mental echoes of trauma can involve drinking, binge eating, overspending, and other addictions and compulsive behaviors. Exposure, or the process of gradually facing the experience, is a component of most trauma therapies. This could look like sharing one story in a therapy office, writing it down, or exploring it with bilateral sensory information to aid in processing, as in eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy. Some therapies also utilize virtual reality to create an immersive space for recollection, Initial evidence using virtual reality in trauma therapy for individuals with combat related trauma has been promising. Yeah, so basically, the first step is recognizing that there's, for whatever reason, at this moment in your life, you're experiencing trauma related to a much earlier trauma that you haven't processed. And so, to process, you have to talk to someone about who you are in your life. You have to be willing to do that
Mm-hmm.
in order for the therapies to be effective, right? Because with eye movement desensitization, whatever that was called, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy, you have to be willing to talk about the traumatic event. So you have to face the traumatic event. And that is the first step to being able to reprocess it.
Yeah, I've brought it up on the show before, but when you were reading this section here, it reminded me of my divorce and how right after, once I got my freedom and moved into my own place again, I did kind of block it out of sight because, when you go through something like a divorce, finally having that freedom away from that person and, fully having the branch of your life with someone who you've helped build a negative little thing with, your first reaction is just like, I'm free. But then I found over time, like, what I've talked about with my experience with Apple in terms of how that went sour. And thinking about it, hindsight being 2020, it was the same type of deal as it was with my marriage. The whole thing of it will just get better if I ignore it and just keep doing my thing. And like it was a situation that I realized that I would, even though in my head I knew a certain situation just had to be done, in terms of the divorce as well as finding different employment. I stuck it out a lot longer than I should have, and that ended up hurting me more than anything else.
Hmm.
Which again, it's like I want to make clear, with something like divorce, yeah, there's going to be tough times in any long-term romantic relationship, and you want to keep on fighting. But as a fellow divorced person, I think you understand the idea of deep down knowing it was over.
Oh, yeah. I mean, every breakup, and I've been through a lot of breakups because I have been most of my life a serial monogamist. Through all my breakups, it was always that way. It was always to some extent mutual down in the very basic foundation. Sometimes I didn't even realize it until after the fact.
But it was there.
Right.
Like think of my friend Phil.
Mm.
When his last days were occurring, like deep down now, I realized I knew the end was kind of coming.
Mm-hmm.
But at that time, it was just like, he's not going to die. He's not going to die. He was a 14-year-old cat when he did ultimately pass down. So he had a nice long life, people. But it is possible to still know some big event is happening or something like that, and your brain will not want it to happen so much that you won't be able to initially acknowledge that.
Mm-hmm.
So I get it.
Yeah. But hopefully over time it becomes easier. But it's only if you open up. Like if you never open up, you can never get rid of those things that you carry.
Yeah, I mean, it can build up like a theoretical poison more than anything. You have to, if you get bit by a snake or a spider or something, a poisonous spider, you want to be able to get that poison out. You don't want to let it fester and be like, oh, it'll go away. you know?
Interesting.
I mean, yeah, maybe. I thought there was an apt comparison.
No, I think it is too. It's just reminding me that I had a little skin problem
Oh,
recently. So it reminded me of that. We can talk about that later on.
yeah, thanks, Tim. How about I dive into number two?
Yeah, let's hear it.
All right, sharing stories. When stories are kept silent, it is common for a kaleidoscope of heart-rending emotions to gather. Guilt, anger, and shame can overshadow us. Sharing a story in another person's presence can prove freeing. Most trauma therapies involve an aspect of story sharing, which can look like anything from group reflection to discussion of a written account. The creation and retelling of a narrative can also be a means to identify what cognitive processing therapy labels as stuck points or areas that have not been fully processed and work with a therapist to challenge trauma induced beliefs. And we did touch upon it again at the beginning, like, again, using the divorce angle. Like, people go through divorce, they think of all the bad things that happened that led to that divorce. And sometimes the reaction can be like, I'm embarrassed to bring it up. And because of that embarrassment, you find yourself at the end of the day repeating those same mistakes, when at the end of the day, being able to be open about it, with the right people, of course. You just don't want to have a deep intellectual conversation like that with somebody at the bus stop.
No, and ideally it would be with a therapist.
Correct. But the importance of doing that is to be able to, one, understand that you're not alone in this thing called life. The troubles you had for person A's bad relationship, person B, C, and D could have experienced the same thing. But two, being able to tell your story, like the point here suggested, opens up different parts of your brain so that you would be able to say, oh, I didn't consider X as a possible issue.
Right. We all have a collection of stories that we have to work through. Like, it's not just a single experience of trauma for most people. Most, I think, probably most people have experienced trauma. Some of them don't know it because they don't have the same reaction to trauma as people who have post-traumatic stress disorder.
Kind of like the people that will tell you a quote unquote funny story about their childhood, but then when they're done, everybody's looking like, what the fuck?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. They don't even see it, right? So you've got this collection of stories, you got to work your way through them, right? It's like sometimes it feels like a game, a video game of some sort, where you're trying to sweep through all the stories.
Mm. Wow, a Sims version of my life would be awful. You know?
Well, the article was saying that virtual reality is something they're studying as a treatment for depression, I think it was.
Yeah, and I mean,
Oh no, sorry,
for like
trauma. Yeah,
PTSD.
PTSD.
Yeah, I don't know how it's utilized, because like the last time I did virtual reality was in the very early days in the '90s. One of the movie theater Studio 28 in Grand Rapids had an early virtual reality machine with a big halo that you put across your head to cover your eyes, and the hand things to use like guns and whatnot. And I tried it, and it was very, very much like stick figure stuff.
Uh,
Being the '90s, of course, when this was out. So I'm sure the technology is better to get a much more immersive experience or something like that. But it would be interesting to do a little bit of a deep dive to find out what that virtual reality stuff entails.
yeah, it really would. I'll just mention that I have had a virtual reality experience in the last decade at least.
Unlike you, old man.
And it was at the at MoPop, the Museum of Pop Culture in Seattle. And
Was I there for that one?
no,
Hmm.
so it was a Game of Thrones virtual reality, going up the wall to the top of the wall and then falling down,
Ah,
as if you were going up in the actual elevator that they actually have, right? It was pretty wild.
all right. Yeah, I mean, it would be cool to find out if there was a VR machine somewhere in town near to be able to have a fun experience with it.
Yeah, I wonder.
Also, too, I've always wanted to try one of those sensory deprivation tanks.
Really, you think so?
I've tried. It's one of those things I want to try once, like taking a train across country. Would I do it again? No, but I did it once.
I just know that I would react so violently to trying to do that that there's no way. I mean, there's just no way. Like, I can't even.
You'd be like Doomsday at the start of the Death of Superman comic, thump, thump, punching your way out.
Yes. No, they wouldn't even get it closed.
Yeah, like open it up! I can't do it! I can't do it! I don't know. Like I said, I thought it might be fun, but how about instead of me rambling any further, you dive into number 3?
Finding peace. After a traumatic experience, we can be placed on high alert. The body's threat system can become overactive to protect us against further harm, making it incredibly challenging to relax. Psychotherapies such as compassion focused therapy and somatic experiencing clue in on this anxious aspect of trauma. Compassion focused therapy exercises build up our soothing affiliative system to help us find comfort and move toward our valued goals. Similarly, somatic experiencing targets the ripples of trauma in the body. Yeah, so these are some interesting therapies as well, in addition to that VR associated thing. In somatic experiencing. So I know that there's more and more research in this area that shows a direct correlation between what the body is experiencing and what the mind is experiencing, and that we can help deal with what we're experiencing in our minds by using our bodies, or having our bodies manipulated, or doing something novel with our bodies.
Yeah. Tie me into a pretzel, sir. But sarcastic there, folks. But I think the big point here is like, yeah, when like if you are avoiding something and it's becoming an issue mentally more and more, then yeah, your body will react. I believe, cortisol is definitely something that would, kick ratchet up in your body, which will make it harder to relax, harder to sleep. And when you have lack of sleep, that can bring on depression and, make even you'll find yourself making even bad choices at that point. So finding taking advantage of therapy would allow you to have that peace to where your body physically can just take a sigh of relief, because maybe by avoiding the issue and not going to therapy, you're not necessarily thinking about it in your head, but it's still affecting your body.
Exactly. And so trying to locate, where am I experiencing that in my body? Yeah, anyway, it's pretty cool stuff.
Indeed. How about I dive into number 4?
It's not at all new, though. I said it was new, but it was not new. It's from the 80s.
Yeah, we just found it, folks, this week. Aubrey did. It was in the corner. But
Okay.
all right.
Next one.
All right, number 4, new perspectives. Particularly in the case of childhood trauma, psychoeducation is often a part of trauma treatment. After extreme experiences, we might not know what is normal in terms of relationships, violence, or other risks. Someone might think, for example, that they deserved their abuse because it is okay to use physical discipline as a punishment. Therapies such as trauma focused cognitive behavioral therapy utilize activities to discuss these things, including what is healthy and what is not. As such, harmful beliefs can be extinguished and new beliefs can flourish. And it touched upon it earlier. Especially when you are dealing with something like a divorce or something like that. People, when they are going through the process of a marriage ending, will say and do things that at the end of the day they would never do to anybody else, and they would regret doing that. It happens. Like saying, calling your partner a jerk or something, or something more harsh than that. But
Mm-hmm.
it's a family show, and we do it for the kids. Um, being able to talk about this stuff, whether it be one-on-one with a therapist or in a group setting, it does offer you the perspective that other people can deal with it too. You don't have to be embarrassed by it. Again, I'm not saying, you should be able to talk about every little single aspect of your life to a person you meet at the bus stop or something like that. Hearing it through a proper therapeutic channel will allow your brain to be like, okay, I'm not alone. And if I'm not alone and I see that someone else has been through this and has gone to the other side in terms of being healthier and whatnot, I can do that too. And I think that would be a big boost for people that are really in need of it.
In the group setting.
Either the group setting or one-on-one, like to your point, I think the reason you're bringing up the group setting, you have more perspectives, you have more people talking about it. In a one-on-one situation, maybe the therapist you're talking to has not had a divorce, maybe their marriage has been rosy for a long time and they've not had the type of experiences you did. So in a one-on-one setting, it can be tougher, but not impossible. But yeah, in a group setting, having that perspective of other people talking about what they experience can give you the freedom to be able to deal with this stuff too.
Yeah, I guess I just caution looking to a therapist to share their experiences with you because that's not what they're there to do. If you know what I mean, they're not really there to relate to you on that kind of level.
And I get that, but they can tell you that, other people do experience this type of stuff too.
Yes, of
Yeah,
course.
yeah,
Yes, of
that's what I meant.
course. Absolutely.
Clarification.
I was just thinking like why would you when you mentioned earlier that depressed people don't believe
That the experiences they're facing are faced by other people as well.
right that they're all alone. They're the only ones that's experiencing. And so if somebody tells you, "Oh no, other people experience it." As a depressed person, I think you're like, "Uh-huh, yeah, whatever, you person who obviously have a perfect life." Or something potentially like that. I don't know.
No, I get your point. Yeah, because in a one-on-one session, the therapist, would not be able to say, "My client Jan experiences this." They're not going to be able to do that. They would be able to talk about some of the experiences of other clients, but they are only going to do it in the most vague of ways. You're not going to know the sex of the person. You're not going to know the name of the person. You're not going to know anything about them. But they can tell you that, but that doesn't mean you as a person listening to the therapist saying that are going to be able to necessarily relate to that compared to a group setting where you're actually hearing from Jan and Bob and whoever.
Right. Totally.
Totally. Well, on that note, how about you dive into the last point?
Okay, the last point here is reconnection. Isolation after a traumatic experience is unfortunately common and can further post-traumatic stress. As such, re-engaging with the world is often a part of healing. The final phase of most therapies for post-traumatic stress involve a focus on relationships and new experiences. Yeah, so particularly, I guess, if you recoil or retreat from society or even your friends and family when you're feeling the emotions that occur with trauma, it can be alienating. And so I think what she's saying is it's important to reconnect with people and make new connections.
I think an example I can give would be the person that did have a relationship to where traumatic stuff happened, whether it be emotional or physical type of stuff too, and how easy I can see that being for somebody after they're able to escape from that to be like, I'm going to block myself off romantically from everybody for the rest of time.
Yeah.
And the reconnection, isn't necessarily about, in terms of the example I gave about, going out and dating as much as you can or whatever, but it is opening yourself to the idea that one, while you did have a bad traumatic experience with this person, that was one incident that doesn't is not reflective of every other potential human being you could meet in your life. And two, the fact that you're in therapy talking about this type of stuff, hopefully you are working on what to look for so you don't repeat those same mistakes in a future relationship. It gives you the power to be able to, it gives you the tools to be able to, hopefully, if it's done right, it gives you the tools to be able to deal with stuff so that if like you do find yourself in another situation to where traumatic things are potentially happening, you're able to see it clearer at that particular time and then, make the changes that need to be made.
Right. There's that cognitive part of it where it is like learning about emotions and what they feel like and what to do with them when you have them. Like all of those things are important. But also, I think it's important to identify where the trauma is coming from. And sometimes absolutely, because if you are an adult, it happened. Um, you weren't in shock or you didn't not remember, you didn't black out or whatever. This is like going very deep in the weeds of trauma. But anyway, the point is, it's something that happened to you recently, or it's something that happened to you a long time ago. It's good to know.
Yeah, I mean, think of how many adults who have fears and trauma related to having kids of their own because of the experience they went through as a kid themselves, and how easy you could find yourself thinking, hey, it may be best not to have kids, even though you have that desire to have them. Going the therapeutic route, going to therapy and, talking it out can identify what those fears are about. And so you can address them to calm those fears down if, having a kid is something you really truly do want. And again, for this example, I'm not implying that the kid did anything wrong, because if the parent was abusive to the kid, mentally, physically, or whatever, that was not the kid's choice. Not
Of
that
course not.
not that it was it's an adult's choice to go through that. I mean, trauma stuff is complicated, but especially with the kid example. But I can see that being a very real fear, and going the therapeutic route can help you identify that fear in terms of opening it up so you can deal with it, I guess, as we've been talking about.
Yeah. Um, so there are many purposes to,
Utilize therapy.
yeah, there are many reasons to utilize therapy.
There are. There are.
Indeed.
I agree. Well, how about on that note?
Folks.
Yeah, how about on that note, we take a moment to let one of our friends in the podcasting world talk about their show.
That sounds great.
All right, we need a break. We'll be right back.
This is Take on the World with Johnny and Mike. And, people always ask me, hey, you got a podcast? What's it about?
I don't know. You ever want to cut your fingers off or learn about a sharp knife?
We could tell you that.
How about murder mysteries or hauntings or any kind of fringe subject?
Anything you could think of. We take on everything because we take on the world.
Now you go take on the world.
All right, welcome back, people. Before we wrap things up, Professor Aubrey has been out in the wild and attended a music fest.
That is true. It felt like a music fest. It was one night of entertainment, so not quite the fest that I'm usually festing at.
It was a Kid Rock tribute band, right?
No,
Okay.
it definitely wasn't. So, you were asking me earlier, Tim, about new music and had I gotten into any new music lately? And I said yes. The band that I saw last night, or the artist that I saw yesterday, is music that I really wasn't into until recently. And that is Sofi Tukker. And Sofi Tukker is an electronic dance music band, or two people that make music using various instruments and stuff.
Is she related to Tanya?
What do you mean?
Tanya Tucker?
Oh,
No.
no, and it's Tucker spelled with two K's.
Mm.
Tucker. And it's Sofi spelled Sofi, if you're looking for this band.
Ooh.
They're a duo, and she plays the guitar, the electric guitar, and he plays the bass and is the DJ, and they both sing and rap and all of that stuff.
Word.
It's pretty impressive. Like, when you hear it, it sounds like it can't be coming from humans, right? It feels so electronic that you think, oh, somebody's just sat at a keyboard and done this. And then when you see it happening in real time, it's not just pieces of something that somebody spliced together. Like, it's a real thing that they're capable of doing. And it's really impressive. Anyway, so I didn't know about this group until, I don't know, maybe even just like a month ago, when my brother-in-law said, "Hey, do you know Sofi Tukker? They're coming to Portland, and I'm going to go see them. You should go see them too." So that's what happened, and went to the Sofi Tukker show. But in preparation, I listened to Sofi Tukker a lot, and I certainly enjoyed the concert more, knowing some of the songs that I was going to hear at the concert.
Now, you said that this was in a case of you gaining more of an appreciation for them as musicians by seeing them in that live experience.
Yeah, because even a video is not reality. To be in the same room with someone and see them in reality without any lens between you and them feels different.
Yeah, like there's one YouTube channel that I follow and adore. It's Polyphonic. And
Uh-huh.
lately, he's had a whole series about the history of music videos. And it shows that for the most part, it's only been recently during the album era that we've had this notion of music must be like on a record or whatever. For the most part, throughout history, music has been presented in the live experience, or, once videotape became an option, film or videotape. Visual elements of music are definitely something that adds to the experience, and being able to, see them live and go through everything and play the music. Like I can definitely see where that would give you more of an appreciation. Like it's like the person that may badmouth Taylor Swift or something like that, but if their daughter brought them to a Taylor Swift concert, they're going to walk out with an appreciation of the work that it takes to be able to do the types of music that she does and the shows that she puts on.
Absolutely. And everybody that I've seen recently at what I would call a concert, it's just been astounding.
All right. Well, I am definitely glad you had that experience. Too many of the bands that I like are either doing state fairs or retiring. So, in terms of seeing new stuff, you have to really impress me. I mean, like if Jomo and the Possum Posse came to Portland, I'd be there.
Would you?
I would, definitely.
All right. So, Jomo, possum possum
Possum Posse.
posse,
Get in the Possum Posse wagon. Drive to Portland.
drive to Portland.
There you
You
go.
can stay in the tiny apartment.
Yeah, we'll take you to the lime stand next door.
Yes, we have right next to us now. We used to have an Indian popsicle place called Kulfi, and it was very popular, and people loved it.
Unfortunately, yes.
But it was so busy in the summer, but not busy in the winter at all. So, like, not a good business for Portland, really. Um, Even though people loved it, I don't think it made much money. So this lime tea stand moved in, and they have 7 kinds of lime teas. That is all they sell.
This is the lime store. It reminds me of that.
I think it's $7 a cup of lime tea. And I'm like, who's coming? Who's coming? I'm going to see these people because they're right outside my window. And I wonder who they're going to be.
Some douchebag from Hillsboro.
Do you think so? I don't think people will come. People came from Beaverton for sure to come to Coolfee. But they came from all around because they were so good. They were like renowned Indian style popsicles.
Yeah, maybe the guy that used to sing across the street, someday baby you'll accompany me. He showed up for those popsicles, so we're not going to see him unless he likes lime drinks. Now we'll be able to hear him throughout the year. Thanks.
That's right. That's right. It's always something.
Always something. Speaking of that, I saw, and you saw part of it, but I saw the entire thing. A pretty good documentary on Max about the life of Billie Jean King.
That's right.
Yes, and I was definitely aware of some of her history, of course. The big thing that people look towards is the infamous Battle of the Sexes, where she faced off against former tennis pro Bobby Riggs, a guy who was like in his 50s and took a lot of cues from professional wrestling. To be able to hype it up. But from what I understand, what you learn in the documentary is that while she was hesitant at first to do it, and somebody else actually had a match with Bobby Riggs before her, another woman professional, and she ended up losing that match, which made Billie Jean King state, I'm going to have to fight this guy,
Right.
in battle. But it was interesting learning about her life because the big takeaway I got from it was just the amount of work that she put in order to make women's tennis as popular as it was. Because if I'm being honest, going back to the 80s, the first really big female sport on a professional level that was getting TV time was women's tennis.
Yeah, exactly. But once there's women's tennis, and it's interesting to watch, then there's women's basketball.
Women's soccer. What it shows ultimately is that while I think it is understandable for something new to have to build up an audience over time, it has shown that if you give, women that equal opportunity to put in that work, it will reap dividends down the road, like it has with the WNBA, with like the new player that I guess is getting everybody's attention. I believe her name is Caitlin Clark. The WNBA just wrapped up their season, but when people were aware of her in college she was like the top scorer in basketball for her college. So she was setting big time records, and that got a lot of people. But this is the first big, huge year of the WNBA. The WNBA has been growing for a long time. I believe it's almost like 20, 25 years old now, but
Yeah.
it's just now getting to the point to where it's getting as much attention as the NBA. It's not surpassing it yet, but it doesn't have to because it's a separate thing at a separate time of year. It's not competing directly with the NBA or anything like that. And it's showing that, gosh darn it, you put on a good product, you put on a good performance on the sporting field, people are going to watch it no matter whether it's a woman or a man.
Well, and not only that, but it takes time to build up an audience, particularly those people who are prejudiced against liking it because it is a change from what they remember from childhood, right? Because we all look back on our childhood. A lot of us look back on our childhood and think society was better back then than it is now.
But I hate when people say that because even the most cursory knowledge of history will show you that that is not the case at all. I mean, unless you were rich, if you were rich and white, you probably had a great life. you know, if you had money, rich is a relative term. You could have been a middle class.
Yeah, I mean that's like so bullshit, and it's like an accepted thing. And I just said it. That's what I said, but it's obviously so not a thing.
But we definitely have people that do fall victim to that, and that's something you gotta really fight against, because it's like some of let's take the women's sports deal. Like in the 70s, they were looking for anything to make it to where people wouldn't follow women's sports, to the point to where you had someone like Billie Jean King realizing that she was a lesbian, even though she was married to a man. And initially, she ended up becoming aware of that and ended up having an affair with a woman, which they talk about in the documentary. And her ex-husband is in the documentary as well. And apparently, they're both very good friends still.
I'm sure they are. They both seem like very lovely people.
Yeah, yeah, but it was the pressure to not talk about that at that particular time. Like, look at Martina Navratilova. By the time we saw her in the 80s or 90s, it's like almost the 20-year mark of her career, and she just came out near the end of her career.
Yeah.
And that, for like Billie Jean King, like, she ultimately came out to the public in the late 70s, and that took a lot of courage.
Yes, it absolutely did. And, people say, so anyway, my point was you got to build up your audience over time, because people who don't remember you existing are going to take you at an even playing field. But the people who remember when you were discriminated against are going to be scared and upset that you're taking something that belonged to them, which was sports.
Yeah. And that is the beauty of what Billie Jean King did. I think she was one of the people that helped Title IX become a thing.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I mean, you can't overstate Billie Jean King's importance to women's rights today.
She and I bring this up because it was brought up in the documentary. I think they talked about like like a Time magazine, like top 100 people of the 20th century. She did to tennis what Jackie Robinson did for baseball. But also their influence not only affected just the sports that they were involved in, but society as a whole. Because, they had, with the Jackie Robinson thing, the ridiculous notion that only white people can play baseball. We ended up finding out that that wasn't the case. Now, because of what Jackie Robinson did, like, it's fully integrated teams for the longest time, and Major League Baseball has actually gone out of their way now over the past couple of years. What they've done is they actually merged the records of the Negro Leagues into Major League Baseball, so that did kind of adjust some things in terms of like lifetime stats, which, again, without Jackie Robinson, who knows if we would have got there. And same with Billie Jean King, in terms of what she did not only for tennis, but how her work ended up helping out so many other women. Like, she is definitely one of those people that we're going to be talking about 100, 200 years from now in terms of the impact that she did for the 20th century.
Yeah, and she was very open about her private life because she needed to be. I think she felt she talks about, even though it was exposing her in so many ways, it was important for her to do, including like going on national television and saying, I had an abortion.
Yep. There was that. She also did help in the 70s form what was called World Team Tennis, which ultimately the concept was like a sports league, like baseball, football, stuff like that. They had teams of tennis players, and they were co-ed teams, and they would have 5 sets, during a particular match between, team A and team B, and each set would be different. One set could be just two men playing singles. The second one could be women playing singles. Third one can be mixed doubles, stuff like that. And how the reason I'm bringing this up is that one of her friends, Elton John, ended up writing a song called Philadelphia Freedom about one of the teams. The team that Billie Jean King was on was the Philadelphia Freedoms.
Huh.
And Elton John wrote that song as a theme, as like a rallying cry for that particular team, because they were such good friends.
Wow. That's really cool story.
Yep. More you know, people.
The more you know.
But definitely a documentary I would recommend people checking out, because again, like I said, like I had knowledge of her, but not as in depth as what this documentary told, and it was great to hear too some more in depth stories about the battle of the sexes, and and like I said, I think Bobby Riggs he had to have watched wrestling,
Oh, yeah, he was absolutely a wrestler. You saw him, he's walking in with in the terrible leisure suit with, the women dripping off his arms.
And he called him like the newscaster. They had an old news clip, and they said, "And Bobby Riggs, the self-professed world's male chauvinist pig," something.
Right. Yeah, like that's something to be proud of. And like, just being bombastic like a wrestler.
Yeah. Now, let's be clear. I think with Bobby Riggs, I think he was more work focused on the short term. Hey, publicity for me is good no matter what happens. But I think he was also cognizant of how it would benefit women's tennis if someone like Billie Jean King did win. Like, I don't think he tried to tank the performance. I think he did try to beat her in tennis, but I think at the end of the day, when she beat him, it was just like, there you go.
I wonder, I mean, yeah, I mean, that's interesting to think about whether whether he was a double agent, essentially.
Yeah, because like I don't get the impression that if he really truly was a jerk to women, that she would have known him until the day he died. Apparently, they were really good friends after that, after that whole ordeal there. So, I have to assume that, again, maybe it wasn't necessarily his intention to help women's tennis, but he saw that it did. And, I think that even if it was by accident, it was a good thing.
Yeah.
All right. Any other thoughts you want to give to our friends at home?
No, none.
You're like, I am fucking drained. We're done. We're getting some food. We're going to end this night and pretend it didn't happen. There we go.
Well, it gets to be that sort of hour.
Yes, the witching hour in a very damp Portland. So thank you all for listening for yet another week. Each Monday, we'll have something in this podcast space to entertain your ear holes. Until we meet again, we bid you adieu.
So long.
And goodbye. Subscribe to Friends Talking Nerdy
On YouTube Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify,
or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Goodbye, darling.